There are around 15,000 reported nuclear weapons in the world in 2017. Why do countries maintain stockpiles of nuclear weapons? The conventional argument in favour of maintaining nuclear weapon stockpiles is because nuclear weapons act as a strong security deterrent in the world. We are told by politicians and nuclear weapon advocates of all kinds that keeping them ensures safety and stability in the world that cannot be matched by any other weapon or security technology, due to the sheer destructive power these weapons can cause. I am going to now focus on some of the problems of a nuclear weapons deterrent. I've summarised these problems into 4 key points to consider. Number 1. The basis of a strong deterrent is that you are not afraid of using the deterrent itself. There is no doubt that the countries which hold nuclear weapons privately understand that any use of a nuclear weapon could result in mutually assured destruction with other countries, and heighten escalations that can cause unintended consequences globally. No one can really be sure which leaders of the nuclear weapon states are bluffing or serious when they say that they will press the nuclear button if threatened. Number 2. The basis of nuclear deterrent is living by threats. The position is made clear to those countries already branded as enemies that if you do anything to us, we shall do the same and much worse to you. In the real world, the laws that govern our conduct as citizens forbid threatening behaviours in our interactions with one another. Therefore, in some jurisdictions, if neighbours were found with loaded shotguns in their gardens with notices announcing their intention to use them if provoked, they would be arrested for an offence of issuing threats and menaces likely to lead to a breach of the peace. A judge might well order confiscation of the guns and binding over both parties to keep the peace without weapons. For nuclear weapons, the analogy is that the neighbours have amassed enough high explosives to blow up not only each other, but the whole neighbourhood, making it uninhabitable for years. The logic here is counterintuitive to enhancing world peace. Number 3. History has demonstrated time and time again that nations have been undeterred by nuclear weapon states. Whether it is when Saddam Hussein used Scud missiles to attack Israel and invade Kuwait, a US ally, in the early 1990s, or China entering the Korean War when the US had a nuclear monopoly in 1950, or the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, or Argentina invading the British Falkland Islands in 1982, or North Korea pursuing their nuclear weapons program, seemingly undeterred by geopolitical pressures today. History is replete with many examples of nuclear deterrence failing to do its job as a strong deterrent. Number 4. Nuclear deterrence does not reduce nuclear weapon stockpiles. They actually do the opposite by provoking proliferation. This is because when one side increases its arms, the other side feels threatened by this, and does the same if not more in their armed response, leading to a constant development of these destructive weapons with no ending or de-escalation in sight. Herbert York, the American nuclear physicist, felt that to accept a substantial chance that the world would go up in nuclear smoke was too frightful and dangerous a way to live indefinitely. We must find some better form of international relationship than the current dependency on a strategy of mutually assured destruction through the use of grotesque nuclear weaponry that creates irreversible damage, death and destruction beyond the human imagination. This now leads us to ponder a very important question. What do we mean by security in the complex world that we live in today? The Prime Minister of Sweden, Olof Palme, once said that international security must rest on a commitment to joint survival rather than on a threat of mutual destruction. The retired Royal Navy Commander Robert Greene has this to say about security. In an increasingly interdependent world, there is no such thing as national security, as security problems transcend national borders. True security is about meeting human needs and tackling the root causes of people's insecurity. Let's now examine some potential transitional steps towards decreasing nuclear deterrence today in order to secure a safer world. Number 1. There needs to be a shift in focus from deterrence to reassurance. There are new global security problems which require cooperation as a collective. Problems that affect all whether you have nukes or not. Climate change, depletion of resources, growing inequalities. It is in everyone's interest to offer reassurances and to tackle global problems together. Any posturing on nuclear weapons is unnecessary. The single greatest threat that can cause irreversible damage in the shortest amount of time is nuclear weaponry. Number 2. Stand down all strategic nuclear forces from high alert and to allow independent weapon inspections for all nuclear weapon countries, so that a complete and accurate register can be produced and monitored based on the true number of nuclear weapons currently in stockpiles. We don't know how big the problem is until we have accurate numbers on stockpiles and at what rate these stockpiles might be growing or decreasing. Number 3. Nuclear weapons and their effects must be stigmatised by the public, just like slavery, anti-personnel mines, and cluster munitions were, which then eventually led to largely successful treaties banning them. Number 4. Learn from New Zealand. They are a country that paved the way towards an inspirational perspective on nuclear weapons, refusing to sign up to a nuclear weapons program despite pressure from Western allies over many years. Number 5. The UN Security Council needs fundamental reforms in order to make powers available to nations that do not stockpile nuclear weapons, so that balance can be created. Unfortunately, the 5 declared nuclear weapon states control the UN Security Council. Until this changes, the UN will be weak on the issue of decreasing nuclear weapons in the world. Number 6. Set up a convention that is based upon the comprehensive abolishment of nuclear weapons by way of negotiations. The Chinese president in 1999 once said, "Since biological and chemical weapons have been prohibited, there is no reason why nuclear weapons, which are more destructive, should not be comprehensively banned and thoroughly destroyed. All it takes to reach this objective is strong political will." Number 7. Countries in Europe that do not have nuclear weapons need to establish nuclear weapon-free zones backed by the UN. Increasing nuclear weapon-free zones means that there is a legal guarantee of nuclear weapons not being used, developed, or deployed in a nuclear weapon-free zone. Through the application of these zones, conditions can be created around the world whereby international outrage would be so massive against the breakout of a nuclear weapon attack that there would be no military or political incentive to use nuclear weapons. Number 8. Nuclear weapon states already have sophisticated non-nuclear weapons that can produce a massive amount of firepower. With the huge amount of influence that NATO retains in exercises, they could be the first organisation of countries to become forward-thinking in terms of security and think about developing a non-nuclear weapons security strategy. If combined with standing down its nuclear forces from high alert, NATO could gain the moral and legal high ground and overwhelming global approval for its responsible actions. This would also send a powerful signal internationally. If these actions can also be combined with the productive use of the diplomatic tool of the NATO-Russia Council, where NATO and Russia officials come to the table and discuss security matters, it may be possible for a discussion to then open up about a new kind of anti-nuclear weapon treaty between Russia and the West.